History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
From the church to the streets, and even in the suites, and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Fannie Lou's Classrooms. We're super hyped and excited about today's conversation as we're going to talk about how are the children doing, and we have some amazing guests lined up who are willing, able, and capable of having this conversation, a very important conversation we want to continue to have. And so we're just going to jump right in today. But first, as I have to give a shout out to the FLC team that makes this thing happen every week. Brooke, let's give it up to Brooke, our audio engineer and everything in between. Then, of course, we have Shanika and Cheryl on our team that make sure we're prepped and ready to go every single Thursday. We want to shout them out and give them a hand clap, too. Cheryl's giving herself a hand clap on the side, too. You know she like be on camera, but, you know, she looked to give the antics out camera. We're going to catch her on camera one day, Brooke, when she's not looking. So listen, we're excited to have you here. And of course, as we mentioned every week, we bring amazing guests on the show. We try to have real good content for you. And so we would like for you to support us if you can. And so you can support us by purchasing a Fannie Lou Classroom t-shirt. It's a nice quality. We'll get it right out to you. So you can go to friendshipwest.org justice page, and you will see the Fannie Lou Classroom link to purchase your t-shirt. So we'll certainly look forward to you supporting us that way. So we're going to jump right in because we have a lot to cover on today, and I want to make sure we can have as much time to have a great conversation with our amazing guests. And I'm going to start with our first guest, Dayner Brashear. Dayner is a licensed professional counselor, educator, and children's author. She currently serves as a mental health clinician for Dallas Independent School District's Mental Health Department. As a clinician, Brashear provides individual, family, and group counseling services in youth and family clinics. With 24 years in the education field, Ms. Brashear has served in the roles of professional development trainer, child development director, special education case manager, high school math teacher, and business system analyst software tester. Her volunteer and ministry work include providing services for teen parents throughout the community and youth and juvenile residential facilities. Dayner holds an Associate's of Arts in Child Growth Development from Metropolitan Community College in Kansas City, a Bachelor of Science in Family Studies from Texas Women's University, and a Master of Arts in Professional Counseling from Amberton University. Dayner is the author of the children's book, I Hear Love, which is described as a celebration and tribute to families and faithfully express their love in every sense of the word. Let's welcome Dayner Brashear to Fannie Lou's Classroom. And I'm going to take a point of privilege to say she is also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She's not only a member, she is my line sister and my dear friend. So thank you for being here on today. Then we have, Dr. India Stewart. India Stewart is a data-driven, equity-focused social impact leader committed to building the just, thriving communities we all deserve. She earned her PhD in Public Affairs, MS in Applied Sociology, and graduate certification in Nonprofit Management from the University of Texas at Dallas. She is a fierce advocate for the underestimated communities and nonprofit leadership in consulting roles across North Texas and taught at the University of Texas at Dallas, University of North Texas, and Dallas College. Let's welcome Dr. India Stewart to Fannie Lou's Classroom. And so y'all got something to say about everybody. So Dr. India Stewart came by way of cornering me at I was on a panel at the Angelica. Mm-hmm. She rolled up and said, Pastor, I got a bone to pick with you. I said, well, pick it. So long story short, she was trying to get involved in the justice ministry, and look, she jumped right in. She's not only in the classroom today, but she's also a faithful volunteer in our justice ministry. So thank you, Dr. Stewart, for picking the bone and jumping in and getting started. We need your gifts. You have many. And then last but certainly not least, we super hyped to have the Reverend Kia Westbrook on Fannie Lou's Classroom. Kia Westbrook is a native of San Antonio. She's a worshiper, and she is a shown-up preacher and teacher after the heart of God. Reverend Kia earned her Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Xavier University in Louisiana in 1993, and her Master's of Divinity from Southern Methodist University, Perkins School of Theology, here in Dallas, Texas in 2013. Equipped to bring both worlds together as an entrepreneur, Reverend Kia is the founder of Like Leaven, a work created to help believers stir up their gifts for the advancement of God's kingdom. Upon completing her assignment as director of Changing the Narrative for Behind Every Door Ministries, where she created and provided oversight to Roots, a youth development program, Reverend Kia moved in faith to work in ministry full-time as director of Like Leaven. Endowed to reach her God-given potential, she served as a ministerial intern under the leadership of our senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes III, and she was ordained by him in 2020. She joyfully now serves as the youth and collegiate pastor of Friendship West Baptist Church. And so welcome, Reverend Kia Westbrook to Fannie Lou's Classroom. So something about Reverend Kia. I think I met Reverend Kia maybe in 2001, 2002. You were preaching for Reverend Stevens.
Oh, wow.
And we were in like a community center. And I said, oh, when she started preaching, I was like, where's she? Who is she? Reverend Stevens. And so then she began to be active at Friendship West, and we were actually ordained together.
That's right. That's right.
In 2020.
2020. That's
Was
what
it 2020? That's what I
That's
just
what
read.
you just said.
So
I'm going to go with that.
So we were ordained together in 20. Yes, it was cold and freezing outside that
Yes.
Wednesday night. So welcome, Reverend Kia. Welcome, Dayner. Welcome, Dr. Stewart. So normally, I'm going to get your permission before I do this. Normally what we do on the show, because we know we all have titles, we know we make this very, very conversational. So if it's okay, we can say Dayner, India, and Kia. Is that okay with everybody?
Absolutely.
Okay, good deal. So let's start off this way. So the Maasai tribe have a way of greeting one another when they see each other passing by. And they greet each other with their language, and translate into English is, and how are the children doing? And the response is, all the children are well. Because for them, if the children are faring well, that's a reflection on society faring well. And so I thought it'd be good to have this conversation around how are the children doing, because I know all of you do that work in your respective areas, and you have a particular lens and worldview. So I thought it'd be good just to have a conversation, because we hear so much about our children and about our youth, and depending on where you get that information, it could tend to be very negative. So I wanted to talk about it in a more productive way and talk about some of the challenges that we have and what we can do as community to be support in that way, not only individual support, but that also look at the way in which certain systems also create harm to our children, how we might think about creatively how we engage and do that. So Psalms 127 says that the children are a heritage from the Lord, a gift. And so I love that, and I love the way at Friendship West, I forget what Sunday, maybe it's the fourth Sunday, we dedicate children back to God here at Friendship West. And one of the things that we always do and we're intentional about is speaking over the children and speaking into the lives of those infants. And I know one of the things I love that we say to them, number one, is that we know you are already endowed and filled with God-given potential, and that it's our responsibility to make sure we nurture and nourish that you may grow and become all that God has already put in you to become. And I love when we do infant dedication. It's like one of my favorite things we do here, because I think it's so important early in life to nurture and develop who the children are. So let's just jump right in. I want to kind of do this maybe in 4 sections with questions that will come with that. So one, I'll start with identity first. Then I'll go to like the trauma, the soul trauma that a lot of our children and youth have been impacted. And then I want to talk about what are the support systems that we can, or already are out there. And then what are some other ways in which we can be of support. And then I want to end with some policies we need to be mindful of, and what we need to talk about, or what needs to change within some of our systems and institutions. So let's just start straight up with just the first question. Anybody can jump in and answer this first, but talk to us about the power and necessity of understanding who they are as children of God, but more importantly, particularly what it means to be an African child. And I'm saying that with intentionality. So,
I'll start.
Okay.
When I have a student or a client in my presence, like you were saying, they're a gift, I always share with them that it's a privilege that I'm able to share that presence with them. And then that kind of validates who they are. And one thing that I start with is like, of course, they're there for, therapy, so there might be some challenges there. And so just to build the rapport and things of that sort, I'll get off on another conversation and then I'll say, oh, your name. What does your name mean? Now, 9 out of 10 times I've already checked to see what the meaning of the name is, And they'll go, I don't know. And I said, oh, well, let's see what their name is. And so we'll go and look, and they'll have their phone. They'll see their name, and I'll go, what are your thoughts about that? So they'll see the meaning of it. And it's amazing how, I just sit back and I just listen to what they say. And does that match? It says you're strong. Does that match what? It says you're beautiful. Does that match what you think? Sometimes they'll say, yes. Matter of fact, I had one young girl, she said her name meant advocate. And she didn't know what advocate meant. So I gave her the definition of advocate. And she said, oh, I did that today. We're in lunch line, and they were teasing my friend. And I had my friend to come in front of me. And I said, see, you're already operating with your name, because when anyone calls your name, that's what they're saying, advocate. So I say our name has a connection with our purpose. Sometimes it means we're named because of maybe some trauma, like you said, might have happened. It might be a challenge. So if your name means strong and you come in and you feel weak, then we know that's a challenge. I don't say weakness. I say that's a challenge. And so you'll be amazed just to let them know that, oh, my name means that, and how they go throughout life knowing that's what my name means.
yes.
And so that's one way I empower them. Also let them know that they're experts of themselves. I'm not the expert. You know yourself better than anybody, okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm just privileged, and I'm just thankful that you're
Yes.
allowing me to help you to go through this challenge that you're having right now.
I love it.
It really makes me think of, and I love the way we have this idea of our children, right? How are our children
Yes.
doing? But thinking through those names, the first day of school, right? What do we do as educators? We go through the roll. We call the roll. And I would always say, okay, here I have your government name, and I will do my absolute best to pronounce it. However, because your own name is the sweetest sound that you can hear, right? So how do you pronounce it? How are you called, right? Not what is your name or what's your government name, but what do people generally call you? If your name is Emmanuel, but you want to be called Manny, right? That means something. Or maybe you are little man, and that does happen in the classroom.
Right.
Let's be honest. But that idea of
Yeah.
how are you called? Who are you called to be? What is your purpose? So I just love the way that, we had this conversation about naming and living into that purpose and
Yeah.
remembering these are our children. These are our gifts, our presents. What are we doing with those gifts? And how are we helping them live into their gifts? It's just like they're a gift to us. How are they going to give back and give to the world?
Nice.
Yeah, so I would say when you're thinking about identity, and especially African kids, African American kids, it becomes important. The identity is important because it drives how they show up. And it's very important. So how they see themselves, whether or not they know what their name means, but even how they see themselves as African Americans, it matters in terms of how they perform. So a lot of times when I speak with the students, it's a work to convince them of their worth and of their value. And if they don't identify with themselves as being intelligent, beautiful, smart, strong, all of the things that we want, the ways that we want to affirm them, then, and they see that to be somebody else, that belongs to somebody else, then now that they have put a challenge to themselves that they know they can never become, I can never be that. And so it matters that we start with identity in terms of who they are, where they come from, hand them a heritage and a legacy to step into. And a lot of them are missing that, which is why then the work that you talked about, Roots to Roots, is about giving the students a history, because they need a place to come out from and to return to. Yes. And if they don't have that, then that's why you find them wandering and not living into who we know that they are. So identity is everything. And I'm so glad you started with that, because that's the baseline.
Yeah, and when I was reading your bio and I said roots to roots, I was like, I love that, right? Dr. Cornell Wells said you can't know your ROUTES if you don't know your ROOTS.
Yes, that's where it came from.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, you were teaching one day.
Oh.
I told you that. I guess you don't remember, but I've told you that several times. Oh. You were doing.
Okay, Reverend Kim.
You were walking in your brilliance as you normally do. I heard you make that quote, and I was like, "That's it. That's the work." And it's to teach our students about their roots so that they can make better decisions about their roots.
Yeah.
Routes. Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of stay there just for a moment, because we are in it. Because what you're saying is so on point, right? But we know that we are in a moment where it's an intentionality to strip those ROTS from our children. And so let's talk about, because I was just reading yesterday, Faith in Florida, where you have a number of Black churches who have banded together and they're teaching Black history, obviously out of their institutions and other places, which is really what we used to do anyway. Yes. So it's not something new, right? That is how we started, of when we really leaned into our heritage and our culture and our language, which is when you begin to strip a person of that. And we know that through enslavement, right? That was intentionality behind that, so you would not know any kind of route to go to, that you would just be wandering, right? So let's talk a little bit about I think we know what we need to do, but what I haven't seen it being done, I'm sure it's been done in pockets around Texas. I'm sure of that. But why is this so important? So when you're talking to your children that come in who need therapy, right? If you have layered trauma, what are the challenges with perhaps any of your African American clients who come in if they have the layered trauma? Are you even able to start from? I hear what you say, how you really get them to see themselves through their name. Mm-hmm. Right, to know that you are uniquely gifted to be in this world. But are you able to also layer that with them understanding where they come from? Well, culturally,
well, when you're in therapy, you pretty much work with is what's presented.
Yeah.
Because, they'll have the documentation. They've done all the diagnosis and stuff. And that's where I empower, because I say, well, I know Mom and Dad or the teacher said this, but why are you here? What do you think? Mm-hmm. Why do you think you're here? Mm-hmm. So I start with the what they present at that point. As the relationship and the rapport deepens, and they, in this trusting environment, then I'll be able to see those layers and unfold. But at the initial part, it's more about them feeling comfortable, them knowing that this is client-centered. Again, you are the expert of yourself. Now, what has been the most common denominator, which kind of shocked me, I won't say shocked me, but I was surprised, because sometimes we think we're going to go in one direction, but it's another direction. But I've noticed that lately, in the last year or so, a lot of my clients are dealing with some form of grief. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a grief of a loved one, they had to move, mom and dad have divorced. So they're dealing with a lot of loss, like you're kind of, going back that loss. And so now we have to work with those things that are tangible to them. Mm-hmm. And then once we restore that, then again, I can go back into what the culture is and things. And then just in when you come to the center, you will see books that
Right.
reflect
Reflect
who you are and things of that
Nice.
sort.
Okay, so you get to it, but it's about dealing with the trauma.
Yes.
And then you can say now, because you're trying to heal those wounds, but you have, it's almost like once you do that, you have to put something in the place of the trauma.
Yes.
So they're not open and susceptible to it again. Then they're building up. Okay, I love it. Did you want to add anything to that? Kia?
It kind of put me in the mind of the idea of root shock, right? That
Oh,
trauma that
yes,
Mindy fully
yes,
love. And
yes,
when,
yes,
you know,
yes.
Reverend Kia is talking about roots to roots.
Yes.
But that idea, before we can even begin the conversation, we have to get at that trauma-informed kind of care. Even we talk about sometimes trauma-informed teaching, coming in, you know, being in a place that we have a lot of underserved communities, people from marginalized groups, stigmatized groups. We have to get at that root of the trauma. And that can be so difficult when we're not allowed to teach.
Yeah.
I know that's why I'm not in the classroom anymore now, because of when those laws started coming down. Hey, I am a Black queer sociology professor in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
They were gunning for me
Anyway.
so let
Yeah.
me step away
Yeah.
before something happens. I was a good teacher. Let me just say that. I didn't not
believe
fall
it.
foul of the law, but it was very much every day thinking about how many words will I have to swallow today in the classroom.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything that's been said. When you mentioned just in terms of just even having permission, being able to unpack that even from a parent's perspective, sometimes working with the child and having the permission to work with the students, getting access from the parent is even difficult sometimes. And so, that's one of the challenges. Because the trauma,
Yeah.
a lot of times is in the home, comes from the home, right? And so being able to navigate those waters to help them unpack in a way that, like you're saying, you're swallowing a lot of things and trying to guide them and lead them in terms of, so what you do then, I would say, when you don't have those privileges or the access to the child to directly do a counseling with them, then that becomes the social emotional learning becomes very important in terms of how teaching them how to meditate or to breathe, or of course, being a woman of faith, then of course, growing them up in a spiritual discipline of how to center themselves, and all of that matters. Without it's just helping them come into touch and be able to identify when the triggers have hit.
Yes.
And the things I can do if I'm not able to ask them direct questions, the things that they can do for themselves, until we can get them into a safe space where they can get the appropriate help that they need.
So let's talk a little bit about and start naming, because a lot of times, if you're like, well, I know because I do the work that I do, I know, but a lot of people don't, particularly if you live, let's say, because this is what I would say, that all of us have some form of trauma, right? Now, some we know is a lot rougher than others. So let's kind of name what have you encountered by way, what types of traumas are children dealing with, or our younger youth and children dealing with? Because sometimes I'll say, when I meet some young people, I'm like, what they've dealt with is something that an adult would have a hard time processing. So I'm just wondering if we want to name some of those things so people can be aware of because sometimes when you see children behave in a certain way, it's coming from a place of trauma, right? Just like a grown-up would, how. So I'm just curious if we want to start, not curious, I would like for us to begin to talk about what some of those traumas are that you hear about that we need to be aware of, so we can then talk about how we might have intervention and have long-term solutions that lead to healing in our communities.
Well, we already mentioned grief, but then there is sexual trauma. Homelessness is really huge in DISD and growing. And then identity trauma. So I think it's the list, just go on. Drug abuse, having to do with that illness, which we know is an illness. Abuse, just verbal or physical abuse in the home. You name it. Our students, our children live in a constant state of trauma. They're always what word am I looking for? They're
Hypervigilant?
Yes, they're always in that state, and it's trying to get them to be able to calm down, to center themselves, to understand how to manage their emotions, just so that they can process and learn. And so one of the things I'll say that, and then is that when I've worked with students, what I realized is when our kids live in so much trauma, is and are expected to perform, which on tests that we know that are not written for them, that are written to prove that they are not intelligent, which is false, which is a lie. That what I propose is this: that for our students that live in communities where there are trap houses, there are regular drive-by shootings. If you ask some students in some of our communities, they actually have gun drills. So like when you hear gunfire go off, you know what to do. Who has to live with that?
Right.
So if I'm up all night, I'm hungry, I'm afraid,
Right.
I'm scared, afraid and scared, and I'm angry. So hangry, and then now I have to walk across the street, maybe in the rain, in extreme conditions, just to try to get to an education facility, and then perform for instructors and a system that may not even understand them culturally. Then for any student that just even passes the test, I will submit to you that that's not an average student. That is a brilliant student. And so we have to come alongside them and begin to resource them the proper way, and to give them a good night's sleep and full bellies and things of that nature. So when you look at when you look at the test scores and it looks like that we're behind, I question that, because of what they have to go through,
Right.
just to be able to get to a test that, again, we know was not written for them in order for them to pass. So you're brilliant.
Right.
You're dealing with brilliant minds, but we have not provided the atmosphere for them to perform at that level.
Right.
And I think we can add on to that for many students, and having a seventh grader right now, even the school isn't necessarily a safe place, because I've had so many students afraid. We do the drills. I remember the first time I had to do an active shooter drill in class, and we have to, put the tables against the doors and make sure anyone in the hallway come inside. But even in the school, you're not necessarily safe. So you're still in that state where you're flooded, your brain's flooded with this cortisol. You're trying to do all of these things, and yet the threat could be coming from inside the house. And then we have the society, and I saw more and more of it, the pandemic, our George Floyd moment, where the world is just a scary, scary place. And how many students have I had every time there's one of these high-profile or even low-profile, law enforcement involved shootings or something like that, we have to stop and talk about it. We'll miss. What do you think? What could he have done differently? Or I remember it broke my heart. I had a young man, and he was just walking home, and his name's Tim. And Tim don't do nothing but go to church, come to school, and go home and work. That's it. And we had to take a whole class period because he was like, well, how could this have happened? I was just walking down the street, coming home from work, and the police stopped me, and they just really hemmed him up, and everybody was like, well, what were you wearing at this time? I was like, well, were you black like you are now, Tim? Was that what? Well, there you go. And that's unfortunate, but that wears on a person. It just wears.
Right. Did you want to say something?
Well, just imagine how the parent has to have that conversation. I witnessed a situation with one of my clients, and he had gotten in trouble in school, and the mom would just, and I always assume the parents do the best they can of what they know, okay? And basically what she said, he was in second grade at the time, and she said, they don't like you. So basically you need to, it's almost like it was your fault. And so I just remember when I was in the room, and I was like, oh, wow, I can imagine what the second grader boy is feeling, thinking, okay, I have nothing to do with who I am, so why do people not like me? And what I have found is a resource. It's called, The Talk. It is a book written by Alicia Williams. And it's beautifully illustrated, and it helps parents as a tool to have that conversation. So I know if any parent is out there who's like, how do I have this conversation with my, my black or my brown daughter or son? That's a really good book. It shows from the child's view that they're just unaware. But the way it's illustrated, I just encourage everyone to look at that. And so I actually have that book for that parent, because that was not my point to say, oh, no, and correct. That's what she knew. And so I had that book for her. It's a resource. And when my parents are sometime in the lobby, and I know they're having that challenge to talk to their sons about that, or daughters, I say, hey, could you review this book with me, and review this book and let me know what your thoughts. So
Yeah.
that's just not a conversation you should have to have, right? We all agree on that. But unfortunately, that's the reality we're in right now. So could you imagine the trauma, like you're saying, that what that could, I'm just going to school. Why do
I'm just walking that. And for Tim, I'm sure he's thinking, if I'm going to church, I'm hearing how I'm supposed to have certain attitudes, actions, and behaviors as I don't know if it's a Christian, as a Christian, and I'm doing just that. And just my black body causes, a threat. So it's as if, and I say this all the time, just about black folks, really around the world, but definitely in America, that, we always are trying to survive and thrive in hostile territory. I don't care if we live in a gated community or we live in South Dallas, right? Exactly. That it's this hostile territory they're always trying to thrive in. And so I'm wondering, because really, what I call is Afrophobia, right? And it's just the world over. And that's why I was saying about why identity and culture is so important, because for Tim, and even the class, how they responded to him.
Victim blaming.
They're victim blaming, right? So it's also that what can we do to, we have to find some kind of way to have the meta-narrative, the counter-meta-narrative of what it means to be black. Right, and I know everybody does their part to make sure, you say we are who we are, we're human. And I think sometimes it has to start with not trying to prove to people that we are human, but we have to turn the question around and say, what is about you that lacks the humanity to see that divine spark in me? So I know this is probably, we probably have the answer, but we can just kind of give some ways. How do we begin, though, to your point, you have a whole classroom that responded that way. So how do we, and see, some of this may be coming from the home, perhaps. I'm sure it comes from various places. And I'm sure in school you only have them so many hours in a week. And then what happens when you go home? Right? So I'm just wondering, is there a way out?
Maybe changing the question, I think, too, from that. Because whenever I think about it as black bodies as a threat, W.E.B. Du Bois saying, how does it feel to be a problem?
Right.
Why do we have to be the problem? So
Right.
pouring in, like in the dedication ceremonies, we're pouring in. You are not the problem. You are a beautiful child of God. You have that spark of divinity within you, just like every single other person. And maybe we just keep repeating it and keep repeating it so that you know, right? Not just know, but that deep knowledge, that feeling knowledge, that embodied knowledge that you are worthy.
That's right.
It's not me, it's you.
Right.
You're exactly right. That's exactly what I was thinking in terms of, adjusting the question or the comment. I have a 9-year-old nephew, and he goes to school, and he is aware of, like you're saying, the microaggressions, and sometimes just, hard, just coming in hard at him. But we had to stop letting him or have the conversation as if he's the problem, but to affirm him that you are smart, you are the top of the class, they're chasing you, they're concerned about you, and how he shows up, so that even now his brilliance will challenge the instructor. And so sometimes we have to say, well, right. We have to tell him, but he's not wrong.
Right.
So, like, his name is, he goes by his middle name. That's the name he chooses that he likes to use, not his first name. Well, he has a particular instructor, teacher that won't call him by that name. And so instead of using his name, he said, she'll just say, go ahead. And she calls all the other students by their names, but he's aware enough to see the difference and to call it out. And so he knows not to cower down. He knows how to tell her and insist on what his name is. He knows how to come home and let his mother know so that we can then have the fight. And then also, I was also thinking it's not just even preparing them in terms of changing the question, but even how we see scripture. So he really loves God. He loves prayer. And what we realized he was doing, he always wanted to be the one to say, well, it's okay. Well, that's all right. He was just, he wants to witness and he wants people to know Christ and he wants them to get it right. But we had to teach them, but it's not at your peril.
That's right.
And that sometimes love doesn't look like turning the cheek. Sometimes love looks like standing up for yourself and and casting a blow to let them know that you just can't be treated any kind of way, that you have to love and respect yourself and demand that of other people. So it's even teaching him and our children about how to understand text, that it's not to lay yourself down so low and allow people to treat you any kind of way. Otherwise, they'll keep coming. Right. But it also, so we had to teach him about Samson and about David and how God sometimes says defend, and go and get. And that's been hard when he has a heart not to harm. Not to harm. And but it's important that we do teach them how to fight.
Absolutely.
You're right. I mean that in every sense of the word.
In every sense of the word.
Yeah. So.
And I think that, but to your point, that's why it's so important, particularly when we're raising our children in the church. How we read that scripture is very important. So we just finished a class this week at HTBI, and we talked about the God of love, power, and justice, right? And that's one of the things we talked about was, what does it really mean to love? And we have to take away from being that anemic love, that kind of love that says you can treat me any kind of way because because I love you, I'm going to tell you how to treat me. That's love. So I have you not be ignorant on how you're going to talk to me and treat me. That's right. Or else I will have to defend. Right.
And I love you so that you don't cross a line that you wish that you thought you could. Right. Exactly.
So I think I'm glad you said that, because I think we have to do that too. So some of this let's just jump right into what's the role of the church, right? Well, I don't want to start. Let's talk about the role of the church and how we can be a solution to some of the issues we're talking about, the trauma that we face, the gun violence that we face. I mean, all the list of things that grown-ups are faced with are the same things our children are faced with by and large, right? Even you have adults who get peer pressured and bullied.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So let's just talk about how you see the role of the church and how we can be both intervention and solution.
I think the exciting thing is, what I'm learning is even our schools are now turning back to the church. And our communities are saying, let's return to who we know loves us, where the safe spaces are. The church, I know on some levels, are not been the safe space, but when you need that help, we still understand, let me find that temple, that building on the corner where I know there's a pastor that has a connection with a God that maybe I may not be familiar with, so that there is a return back to the church right now. Yeah. And so we do then have a responsibility in the conversation that we've been in recently to discern those needs and address them. Right. But what an opportunity that we have to meet people's needs and to understand that God is bigger and that God is present in our daily lives and is concerned about how we live. And so when you talk about solutions, I think we return to being the church that we were. And that's the as the Black church is the church that educates, right, that builds, that prepares, that sends. And again, as I said before, a place to come back to and a place to go out from, a foundation. That's the solution. And I think the difficulty of it is that while we have the power and the authority to do it, the church, and I think I may have heard you say this. I was watching some of the Fannie classrooms. I think I may have heard you say this. I'm cheating a little bit. But it's this idea, though, that we're not resourced like the other organizations may be. So even then, the church, if we're going to be the full solution
right.
is learning how to collaborate.
That's right.
And come outside of our walls. So sometimes we think everything has to be done within these walls.
Right.
And I think the work is so vast at this point, and so
Yes.
that we
Yes.
we can't do it without some type of collaboration
Right.
with community and organizations and businesses and the like.
To be a home, right? That idea, some place we can come back, even if our maybe family home is not where we might want to be. Being a place that is not just these four walls, right? Because the harvest is great.
Right.
Do we have enough laborers? Do we have enough workers willing to do the work? And not necessarily for credit or accolades,
Right.
but to do the work because it matters to all of us, even if you don't get credit for it. That's what it's about.
Coming from the, I was raised in the AME church.
Yes.
African Methodist Episcopal.
Yes.
And we were just, I mean, I remember in the 90s when I think the term African American came out. Well, being from the AME church,
Right.
we already were connected
You was
to
African.
that. You know, we knew Richard Allen, and it was such a presence of who you were. Yeah, you were from Africa. You know, that was nothing, strange to us. And I remember having those Black History programs and then just having just the speakers that would come. And I think we, like you said, you have the Bible, you're at church and you're reading out the Bible and things of that sort. But also you can also mix our history in that. Our current history. A lot of times we, you go to the average probably Christian bookstore and, you will have all these people, but what about, I can't think of her name right now. How about Coretta Scott King? That is a great Christian woman. Mm-hmm. Okay, read her bio. Mm-hmm. Where she says that there were times when I believe she went up to school in Ohio, I believe. Don't quote me, but she said that she had to learn how to praise God and worship the Lord by herself in her room. How she had. That's where that comes from. Knowing who you are and taking your faith and your identity. We do not have to sacrifice because, we're Christians. Then I need to put my heritage to the side. That's not an option. And I've heard individuals says, well, I'm a Christian first.
All are one in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yes, I get that. But that doesn't mean you have to set aside we have a proud history here in this country. Just the fact that we were able to endure what we have endured. And I'm standing next to you, in my right mind.
In your right mind.
That's right.
that part.
Not only I'm just here, I'm in my right mind.
Right.
And I'm sharing with you on how to design this bridge, or how to do this. I'm standing from you, and your history was totally different from mine. But I'm standing right here in front. I'm here. So.
But I think to your point, just by what you saying, you grew up AME, African Methodist. Now, they could have said Black Methodist Episcopal, colored. They were intentional about saying African. And I think, so to your point, say, I'm Christian before I'm Black. But see, that's not what they said. We're African. And we're Christian. Right? And I think that's where, it's interesting when people tell me that, I'm like, oh, for real? And then let's talk about that. Right? Because I think why it's important to say, why I think you shouldn't say that in that order is because when you look out, we love to say how Jewish people are very much always together, right? How they stick together. So the assumption some people make is that all Jewish people practice the same religion. So some Jewish people are self-proclaimed atheists. Some are Hasidic. Some are Orthodox. They are bound together by language, history, and culture. Right? And so we tend to can't do the come together because you Kojic, you Baptist, You know, Baptists already be all, you know, we wild. We go where we want to go. I can believe they going to start church in the corner. Can't nobody tell me nothing. Right? So when you have people who are Methodists and other denominations, there's a lot of hierarchy to it. And so we get split up over these denominational divides. Or if you don't go to church, or if you at the mosque, right? Some kind of way we feel we all come to this table, because it goes back to what you're saying, Reverend Kia, about we can't do this alone.
Right.
We're going to have to be able to broaden, open the table to say, okay, you're not Christian, that's fine, because we're going to agree on this thing, because our children need us, and we need to be able to identify this agenda we all can work on together, regardless of what we believe. Because in most every religion, we all believe at least something along the same lines of we ought to treat each other like as humans, as God's creative design.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's where sometimes we get hung up in why when you look at other communities and we say, oh, well, look, they do this and they do that. Well, we could too, but we are always finding ways to separate ourselves or be individualistic and not communal mindset. So I like that you brought up A and me, because that goes back, that speaks to it, right? That are you black and Christian, or are you Christian and black, right? When you were born, you were black before you became Christian or whatever religion that you are.
But just even identifying, why separate the two?
Right.
That my faith in who I am in the Creator is just who I am. I'm not separating. My culture is not separated as if it's separate from who God is.
Right.
And so it's one, first of all, my culture is within my faith and so on and so forth. So I'm not separating the two. But even when you were speaking just now, my brain is going off because you were saying some things too, but I want to go back to what you were saying when you were mentioning walking into a bookstore or library and seeing the word environment came to me. And environment matters.
Yes.
From texture to sound to the aesthetics and what's in there. So we have to also be mindful of what kind of environment that we're building. I think you may have mentioned that earlier. When you go into the schoolhouses, I know sometimes you got to go into different classrooms, depending on what the teachers have up or what we have in the hallways. Says something, it's a message without saying out loud what it is you're sending something. People know whether or not they're invested in terms of how the environment is. Is it a peaceful environment? Is it hard? Does it have hard edges or soft edges? And is it hot? Is it cold? You know, all of those things matter. So environment is very important. And then now I lost my thought in terms of what you said, but I was getting so excited when you were talking.
So did you want to say something?
Actually, I was getting so excited because it reminded me of what Reverend Westbrook said. For me to stand next to you, all of the, obstacles that we had to overcome, just like those extraordinary students, just to get to school today. Don't ask me why I don't have a pencil.
Right.
Ask me about the 15 things I did to get here this morning.
That's right. That's so good.
It reminds me of everybody old enough to remember Different World.
Oh, yeah.
So you remember the episode where Whitney went to the community center?
Yeah.
And little Dion stole her wallet.
Yes.
And bought him that bike. And so I watch a lot of TV.
Right. Good.
But you remember when she was trying to go in on Dion, Sinbad said, wait, do you know how many game territories he has to cross just to get to the community center? Like sometimes we have to take a step back and say, well, now, what are all these challenges? And then instead of us maybe complaining and casting judgment, well, how can I be a part of the solution? And I know it's a great work. I know it's a lot of great organizations doing amazing work. And I'm just wondering, to your point, Reverend Key, is like, how can we also build our capacity and do more of the work if we can come collectively together, right? That we have a vision for our children thriving, and we're saying, here's the vision. Here's what we need, and who can plug in here and do this part?
Right.
Who can plug in and do this part? Because sometimes we try to do it all. And I think one church, one individual, one system cannot beat this institution called America, right? The way in which it was shaped, formed, and fashioned. The systems that we deal with are undergirded and upheld by white supremacy. That's where it was founded.
Yes.
Right, in our education system being one of those. And so I've lost my train. I'm getting like young, lost my train of thought. So, but I did want to talk about, so we dealt with the church issue. Did you want us, I have one more round because I want to round it with one more round of questions.
Really quick, when you're talking about us coming together, that's where we do have to be able to be willing to cross lines, because I know when I came up, it was like, every pastor wanted to be the pastor to come up with the idea, and we're not going to do it because it didn't come from us. Well, I mean, really? Because the reality of it is, if we come together as a collective, now in relationship, understanding our students, then no matter which direction our students move, if they go east, if they go west, because we're in relationship and we're collaborating with one another, they haven't gone outside of the realm of the protection of who we are.
Right.
And it also means we have the power to control our data. And when people are coming for us and our information, we don't have to split ourselves up and then sell our information. Or because what I find is people will come in, ask us some questions, and then go build.
That's right.
What we need, and then charge us for our own solutions, or for our own care. Why are we giving all of that away? But if we would work together, like you said, and if you don't, you can leave this program, you can leave this church, but we're connected. So we're in the same kind of village. It's the extension of the village.
That's right. That's right.
And yeah, so
no, you're on point.
coming together somewhere in there.
You're on point. And I think about.
Still not sure about that.
Is that me? Excuse me, classroom. My watch keeps picking up on us talking. The watch is trying to get it on the classroom.
She said she ain't sure about it.
We're gonna have to.
White supremacist Siri.
She don't need to know. See,
Right.
they don't know what we talking about.
Right.
Because we didn't just build this, so she don't know
Exactly.
our culture. But to your point, it's important because and this is what I always think about when we talk about what does it mean for us to come together. It always takes me back to the hull of the slave ships and this Thurman's question of what manner of spirit had to exist in the bottom of those boats from Africans from every various tribes who were not the same, but we in this together.
Yes.
It's our collective survival that's at stake here. And I think we have lost a sense of that. Because I feel like if I've eaten 3 meals today, my kids are faring well in school, everybody's okay. And it's not a problem. But we have to be able to step outside of that and say, well, my kids may be doing well, but I can see that's that sour bona that we say during our infant dedication. I see you, your essence, your divine spark of who you are. So that's why I think it's so, but that requires grown-ups to be able to model for our younger children, what does it mean to understand who you are, your culture, your language, your identity, and what it means to work collective. Right. So that's a big challenge I think we always tend to have on almost every front. And to your point, we got to be, so what wasn't your idea?
Right.
Because then it comes down to, are you concerned about, and we talked about this in class this week, are you a do-gooder or one who wants to do good?
Yes.
Because see, a do-gooder needs you to always need something. They have to feel needed and important. But one who does good is looking at how can this benefit the whole? And it's not about me. We love saying it's not about me. It's about God. Oh, is it really? Because your actions and your attitudes going to let us know if it is or not. So I think that's so important. What'd you say, Cheryl?
I said, if you have to say that, then it's not.
So,
But I do have a question.
yes. Put on camera. No.
No.
Don't put on camera.
So my question was, because you were talking about kind of the challenges and working together, and that it's important for us to be able to do that, but the adults have to have the mindset to do that. So we're really coming at saving our children from two points. One, lifting up the adults to get them to where they need to be to model what needs to happen, but then also creating those spaces where the children are safe and can learn, and then, that just becomes naturally who they are because they're learning from a younger age that this is who I am and this is how we have to operate in community because we are community, regardless of, what slice of the community you want to end up in. So anyway, that was my comment.
But that puts me in mind of when you say environment, right? Or also an ecosystem. And I think too often we have an ecosystem. Or we have this thing where we're not recognizing that, let's just put it in a Christian context, the body of Christ, right? So the hand can't say, oh, I'm not a part of the body. The eye can't say I'm not a part of the body. It's the same thing, though. We have to be coming at it coming from different, cultures and tribes, but we're one and we are worried about the survival of the ecosystem. Right. We all need each other. Right. And I think that's sometimes a stumbling block because it's an ecosystem for too many people. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, Dr. John Henry Clark says some of us have ego starvation. They were starved for attention and the need to be wanted and to be out front. So, Dana Jackie, did you have?
No, I'm just meditating and marinating all this information.
That's such a classic Dana response. That's so classic for you. So we have 5 minutes left. So what I want to do with the last 5 minutes. So currently, and it could be going on right now. I was trying to check my phone to see if they were still in committee. But down in Austin, this is the fourth special session the governor has called, and HB1 is a critical bill that is trying to become law. So while the bill has some incredible things, funding for public education, as well as a much-needed, long overdue raise for teachers, but they're also tying in private vouchers. And this is why it's having a difficult time getting through. So talk to us about, so that's one policy, that's one potential bill that could become law, which we believe that private vouchers will completely take money away from our schools that need it. And these private vouchers are going to go to these families who probably can't afford private school, mainly white families, right? Let's call it what it is, who would then use that. So talk to us about, are there any other policy issues or any other things in terms of education that impacts our children directly we need to be aware of? Just by you working with youth and young adults. Is there anything that you know that we need to be aware of by way of systems and institutions, how they're functioning to cause harm? So we talked about how we create systems to help our children, right? But what about the systems that also cause harm to them? What do we need to know?
CRT. I mean, it's still, they're cracking down. So all the things that that would never happen. And then, yes, it happens. And I think we do need to keep our eye on the ball on that one.
Yes.
And the reason we need to keep one of the many reasons we need to keep our eyes on CRT, because anytime you try to erase anyone's past, you're trying to actually get rid of their future.
Yes.
And that's serious. Yes. I have an amen corner over here.
Yes.
And, it may sound, you know how we lace things and put things, and it sounds like, oh, no, we don't want to be harmed or anything like that or feelings hurt. But when you try to erase my past, then you're trying to really eradicate my future. That's what you're doing.
And I don't get my scholars mixed up. Dr. Jacob Carruthers calls it historicide, where you try to kill my history. Right, and if you read Intellectual Warfare, he deals a lot with that. And then what I always like to tell people about Bobby Wright would say, we suffer collectively from menticide. Like we have totally given our brains over, right? And our brains are still colonized, or they say we still have chains on the brain, and that's what that's the play. And that's why I could erase. That's why it's so important, and for the fact that they don't even teach it in school, but they're using it as a cover, like they usually do. Right? We always got to find a way to justify what we know we're doing is wrong. And in my opinion, it's evil. What they're doing are acts of evil.
It's narrative violence.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
It is very structural violence too, right? And that's the form of violence we have to, I think, organize more around. It's easier to see the physical violence, police brutality, environmental racism, right? That's because we can see how that harms you right now. But it's the structural violence we also have to give attention to, because that kills us slowly, to your point, right? Because if I never know who I am, well, then I don't even fit here. So then I'm going to become more of in that enslaved mentality. And I always take what I don't deserve, and I always just be and settle for whatever they give me.
Which comes back to identity.
Yes.
What we started with.
Absolutely. Come on, teacher.
Absolutely. And I would just add to that for those of us that keep claiming the word, and to your point, want to claim Christianity, it's very clear. Satan came to kill, steal, and to destroy. And we have to be willing to tell ourselves and live in a way that understands it's intentional. They mean to kill you.
That's right.
And they mean for us to kill our children, right?
Yes.
To put the weapons in our own hands and destroy ourselves. And so it's intention. And when we can get that in our minds, that there is a real attack, then maybe we can then respond in a way that says, I'm not going to stand here and allow you to murder my future.
Well, 1 minute, that's a good place to stop. We got to have a part. Happens every classroom. Like, we got to have a part 2. It's just not enough time. Listen, give it up for Dr. India Stewart, Dayner Brashear, Reverend Kia Westbrook for today's classroom. Very powerful conversation. Couple of announcements. Number one, remember, you can support, you heard the brilliant minds around this table today. You can support Fannie Lou's Classroom by purchasing your Fannie Lou Classroom t-shirt. You can scan the QR code if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can go to friendshipwest.org, Justice, and click on Fannie Lou's Classroom. And listen, mark your calendar. You do not want to miss next week, which really ties into, it's going to be a carryover from this conversation with our former executive pastor here at Friendship West, Reverend Damian Durr. We're going to talk about, are Black institutions still relevant? So the 3 main institutions we're going to talk about are going to be our HBCUs, our mutual and beneficial aid societies, and the Black church. Because we want to talk about what do we have at our own disposal that we can strengthen to be able to save our children. So if I walk past Dana and say, how are the children? I don't want her to say, we got work to do. I want her to say, all the children are well. So that's next week, 12 o'clock noon in the classroom. Lastly, at Friendship West, speaking of our children, we are doing all we can to make sure we support the most vulnerable children in DISD. McShann Elementary School in North Dallas and Haynes Global Preparatory Academy on the campus of Paul Quinn College. The students and families are in need of so many personal items, but we also want to bless them, the children and the young people that is, with also some nice holiday gifts. So you can help us make this goal by either clicking the QR code that has donation drive. Click that QR code. You can make a financial contribution. All the proceeds we receive will go directly to purchasing needed things for the children and youth and or toys for the youth. And you can scan this donation drive wish list, and you can see what's available, what they're asking for from each school. You can drop those off at the receptionist desk during the week here at Friendship West, 2020 West Wheatland Road, 75232. Or you can drop them off on Sunday mornings. Meet us at the Justice Table. That's all we have for the classroom on this week. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you in the class next Thursday at 12 noon, and we rebroadcast on Fridays at 7 p.m.
From the church house.